Hello YouTube, Ronan Kazi. Fallout 76. Recently, summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, I visited some of my family, extended family. And while catching up with things with my cousins, more like brothers to me, one of my cousins mentioned that he had something happen or there was a coming thing in where he lives. And it's a significant thing. He's around my age. And so when you get older, you're always wondering when you should retire, when you should start slowing down. Or, in the case of this part in the video, what you shouldn't do. Sometimes you stay somewhere too long, you push your luck, and you're going to see what happens here. So this is something you always do. When did I start thinking about that? Oh, you don't really think about it in your 40s because you're still, if you have a family, and by family I mean if you have children, the children are taking up, at that point they're taking up a lot of your thoughts because their life is pretty complex at that point. This is normally when I ask you to like, subscribe, share, unsubscribe, resubscribe, comments if they're available, please, and down goes Frazier. So you don't think about this in your 30s, and you certainly don't think about it when you're younger than that. You don't think about when you should stop. You're thinking about how do you ramp up your life and how do you achieve your goals and everything like that. And so maybe in your 50s, you start thinking about, you know, when is the right time to pull back on certain things. And so for me, I used COVID. I wouldn't have started this channel if it wasn't for COVID. I had wanted to do this for a long time. But I just, quote unquote, didn't have the time. I was all into my career. I was all into, where I worked was far from my home. I had like a 3-hour commute both ways. So I had 3 hours just driving back and forth to my job at a minimum. And so when COVID hit and I didn't like the things that were happening at my job and I couldn't take care of people the way I thought they should be taken care of during COVID that were employed for us, I just decided to leave that job and I just pivoted. And so my cousin has these things, these omens, these signs in his life that are huge. And so when I hear them, I'm like, oh my gosh, immediately, you know, you need to pivot. That's in me. And because we're cut from the same lineage, our fathers were brothers, so we have a very similar work ethics. I know he doesn't want to stop what he's currently doing. He's very successful. All my cousins are very successful. Not just financially. They have families. They have accomplished a lot. They take vacations. It's the things that it seems like a well-balanced life from the outside. But as you know, and as I know, from the outside's not what you're dealing with on the inside. So how do you recognize signs? I also had this discussion with an employee I was trying to mentor at one of the places I was at. There'd be these signs in the universe that, you know, this didn't work, this didn't work. Like you should not keep doing that. And so when you're trying to be successful, what's the point where you're going to be successful no matter what, or you should stop? And this is always a thing. There's no specific, concrete, because it wouldn't be a dilemma. You wouldn't have two choices if you had to choose, right? If it's obvious, everyone knows how to do that. The problem is what I found in my life and what I've observed in other people's lives, when they come to a crossroads, they get a myriad of different choices of where to go next. And it's hard to decide what to do. When you're younger, you might default to, I'm going to take the most expedient path to the front of the line. And so what you have to think about is the following. Where do I live? Who am I? Where do I live? How big is this company? If you live in Podunk, right, what are the odds that you're the top of the heap and you're in Podunk? The odds are you're not, right? So you have to factor that in. So if someone's offering you something that's way before when you should be offering it, there's got to be a catch. Now, this may be the cynicism I tell you that I suffer from as an older person. I'm skeptical, yes, but then it goes into cynicism. And so reading omens wrong or prophecies wrong or signs wrong are just as bad. I'll bring up the story of Oedipus. Oedipus' father was a king, went to the oracles, and they said, your son's going to kill you and, you know, marry your wife and blah, 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 horrible things. So king has a baby, and I am really doing this story a disservice. It's a good story to read, and there's a lot of good scholarly YouTube things you can watch on it, or actually you could read it, God forbid. We're getting invaded by drones, everyone. Autonomous drones, everyone. Anyways. So the king's wife has a baby. He says, get rid of the baby, set it out to die, get rid of it so it doesn't kill me. But, of course, people can't do that. Send it to the next town. Long story short, Oedipus is walking down the road, meets the king, won't yield, kills the king, which is his father. Then to replace the king, and then they'll let whoever can solve the riddle of the Sphinx to replace the king will get to marry the wife. Obviously, Oedipus, otherwise the story wouldn't work. He solves the riddle, marries the queen, which is his mom, has 4 kids with her. When he finds this out, he gouges his eyes out with his mother's jewelry. That's a tale, right? A warning. That might be a Last Destination. That might be one of those movies where you can't change your fate. Like you were going to die anyways, no matter what you do, you're still going to die. Which means you don't have free will. Which, if you follow the channel, you know I'm pretty much against. So if it's not that, if it's not a big case for determinism, then it's a case for you got to read the signs better. And ultimately, what I'm going to tell you, what I've lived in my life is it's a mindset you have that when you come to these crossroads that you make a choice and you don't look back. And there's a lot of things that people toss around that are in pop, zeitgeist is, we live in a simulation. Well, if you live in a simulation, we have a story about that in the Matrix. Break out of that simulation, reprogram the simulation, do what you want. You don't have to be a slave to it. Ronan, it's hard. You're asking me to go against everyone at school. They're all doing this. Not going to know those people for the most part. You might know some of them. You've really got to spend this life. The quicker you can figure out who you are. And that's a tough, tough, tough question. You got to read the signs. So I'll give you my case specifically. You know, several times ad nauseum, I've told you my dad died when I was 18. What should I have taken from then? I could have leaned harder on my mom. I could have just folded. I could have done a million different things. And so what you do with that sign is the important thing. Goes back to these fundamental things. What do I like? Who am I? What am I trying to accomplish? Because when that moment comes, like my cousin, when he has this big sign that plops down right next to him, it's time for him to pivot. That's the world telling him. Now, what does he pivot to? That's the hard part. That's the free will. Because I would crush people that are deterministic in that this thing happens that was not predicted, that you couldn't predict it from the Big Bang, if the Big Bang was even a thing, because the James Webb telescope is showing us, making us question everything. I watched a podcast with an astronomer that, you know, well, we have all these theories. All their stuff is just guesses anyways. They don't know. They have some ideas. Maybe we can tell what a star is made of because the light, when we put it through a spectral analysis, we can tell what elements cause that light to be that color. Okay, got it. Don't know how far away it is. If you look at the history of astronomy, it's just a myriad of, we didn't realize. Is the thing moving faster apart? Then if it's moving faster apart and there's no mass, then it must be this thing called dark energy that we can't explain. And for everything to work, then there's 95% of the mass in the universe has to be dark mass. Mass is energy, so it's the, you know, if we, right, so, you know, it's a guess. So I forgive you if you don't know exactly what you want to do, because we don't know a lot about anything. But this is something you should contemplate. And I'd submit to you, what kind of character are you? I've made several videos about what kind of character are you? What kind of character are you in your life? Where are your slider bars? Can you change those? Of course you can. Yes, it's fun playing a game. Yes, it's fun doing all that. Why do you do it? Just ask yourself why a little bit. I'm not asking you to spend a lot of time. I'm just asking you to spend some time, because you might get a sign someday. And it might be your opportunity to go a great way, to change your life in a really positive way. Or like Oedipus, or really it's not Oedipus, it's Oedipus's dad, who sets in a chain of events that cause Oedipus a lot of misery. Now, you don't want to be like, you know, there's movies about this. You don't want to be hypersensitive. Again, there's a balance in everything. There's a bandwidth where you need to stay in, where you're at your optimal focus. All of these things, none of that changes. But be aware there are signs. And as I talked to my cousin more and more things, as he explained it, there is a depth to the signs. Didn't tell him exactly what to do. Now, of course, I gave my opinion. But I asked him, what did he want to do? What did he imagine himself in the future? And I said, you might accelerate that. And that gets back to the beginning. As you're getting older, when do you step out of what you've been doing? You've worked your whole life. I worked my whole life to be in charge of things. So I did that in the Coast Guard. And then could I do it again in the civilian world? I did it again in the civilian world. What mountains left to climb? I have a character level 70 in Diablo. I love Diablo. I play it with my other hardcore characters. But what am I getting if I get 800 level gear? I get nothing. I get the same experience. So I'm looking for challenges. I'm not playing the Division for the loot. I'm playing the Division for the scenario that's random, that happens, that's interesting, that I can learn from and share with you guys. So, what are the signs you're ignoring, or what are the signs that you're following in your life? This is Ronan Kazi, signing off. See what I did there, YouTube?